The US and English blogosphere and media, and much of the world too, is focused on the continuing meltdown of so-called US President Joe Biden. It's, he had a big boy press conference where he called Donald Trump vice president, and he called Vladimir Zelensky Putin, etc., etc. Now, this is obviously a very high level military psyops, and you probably thank the NSA who gave me this T-shirt for this, because what it's done is it's flushed out all the puppet masters of the so-called fake Biden regime. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them. It's caused people like Barack Obama, Schumer, Pelosi to be flushed out into the open, and they're freaking out because their facade, this Joe Biden facade, has been taken over by people who wish to overthrow the people behind the Biden regime. Now, what people need to understand is the U.S. already has a military government. If you go to the White House press release page, the official White House page, you'll see that Joe Biden has put out a declaration that he signed power over to the Secretary of Defense, and in some cases to the Secretary of State. And no, it's not Lloyd Austin. Lloyd Austin is a puppet with no power and no control over any military whatsoever. He's the spokesperson for the Rockefellers at the maximum. So the U.S. already has a military government, and this will become increasingly obvious over the coming days. Does not mean, though, that the battle is over. There's still a powerful faction that needs to be removed. They still control Google and a lot of the corporate or internet infrastructure, like Meta and to a lesser extent Apple. So the fight against Silicon Valley will have to continue, but clearly something fundamental has changed. Now, there's also, of course, something going on in the UK. Is we made us notice this Keir Starmer government has quickly degenerated into a clown show with the usual, the crazy woke stuff going on in the U.S. And we have now confirmed, not only with people close to the Japanese emperor, but also MI6, that King Charles died 2 years ago, and what we're seeing is an AI plus an actor. And so the entire British government is illegitimate, and it may just, in fact, be a media show at this point, not actually reality on the ground. I hear that MI6 and MI5 are, doing some what you call wet work to clean up the establishment in the UK. We'll have to see how that goes, but clearly there's still some kind of civil war going on. And when you see the airwaves dominated by a fake show, it's not over. Now, the other thing is the French election. That is a warning to the United States, because what happened was in the first round, Marine Le Pen and the far right, as they call it, it's actually patriots, won an overwhelming victory. And then in the second round, it was stolen from them. And if you look at the details, you'll see that the left-wing parties that helped keep Le Pen from power are dominated by Muslim immigrants from, non-French countries, the Middle East and stuff. So in other words, they used these immigrants to steal the election. And remember, the United States, they let in 30 million illegal immigrants, and they're giving them the right to vote. So clearly the plan is to do the same. And at the same time, we're seeing a huge breakdown in law and order in the United States. So we expect to see the National Guard called out. But clearly the summer of discontent is well underway, and there's a lot going on. However, in the rest of the world, big things are happening. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization had a big summit, and the big takeaway for me is that Russia has now signed a military alliance with North Korea, Mongolia, and India. What do these countries all have in common? Borders with China. So in other words, they've offered the reassurances to India that they will help protect them from China. And this has been a key to getting India on board for the issuing of a new BRICS currency. Russian FSB forces contact me and said that they expect some sort of announcement for this currency by the October BRICS summit. So that means that the US dollar internationally is likely to be replaced. The main obstacle to this was India, and Russia has done a good job. They've sent India like $60 billion worth of oil and weapons and been paid with rupee that they can't spend, but they're saying that's okay. You know, you're part of the global south, will help you develop. So they got India on board. Now, the other thing, of course, that should be on people's radar screens is that the Chinese sent troops to Belarusia. That's right on the border of NATO. And this is a sign the Chinese are also agreeing to this new Eurasian security arrangement, and they've invited NATO to join. Now, NATO, they just had their big 75-year anniversary summit where I think Jake Sullivan in a New York Times editorial summed up the real meaning of NATO. He basically said NATO is good because it helps sell weapons and employ Americans. So the Planetary Alliance, the White Hat Alliance, is willing to keep the military industry humming so that we can get them on board and prevent world war. As the Chinese like to say, it's cheaper to feed a guard dog than just to fight a hungry wolf. So if NATO joins this new Eurasian security arrangement, they will, their arms industry will be well funded, more than at present, because the other side has deeper pockets by far. And the Five Eyes will be in charge of ensuring that the world's oceans are free and that people can, you know, engage in commerce and transport and without any problems. So that's the sort of division. The Eurasian landmass is now the Shanghai Cooperation Organization plus the Europeans bailiwick, and the world's oceans are for the Five Eyes. And this is all working towards some kind of announcement this autumn of some new global arrangement, not a new world order, but a polycentric world order. Of course, there's still a lot that has to be done. This week, I had face-to-face meetings with North Korean representatives, and they are determined to unify the Korean Peninsula. And the Five Eyes is basically willing to agree to this. Now, the Koreans, the North Koreans, have some of the world's most valuable mineral deposits, huge amounts of gold, rare earths, titanium, lithium, etc. And they're asking for mining companies to provide heavy equipment so they can start processing these ores. And I think this is a very good opportunity to get in on the ground floor, because once Korea is unified, the sanctions will be lifted and there will be a boom in that peninsula. So getting in now is a good idea, but something is going on. There's also, of course, a move to set up a military government in Japan and clean up the corruption, especially the people who've been involved with vaccine murders, and that is still ongoing. When we see the public removal of fake Ambassador Rahm Emanuel, you'll know that process is finished, but it's still underway. As it stands, he has no real power or influence, and he has to hide because he is wanted for mass murder, and there is a bounty on him because he is one of the world's worst mass murderers, as are many of the other people who are still out there. And at the end of the day, we also have to locate David Rockefeller Jr., Alex Soros, and all these people, behind the scenes. and remove them from positions of power, especially control over mega corporations. But overall, we're going to still watch the collapse of the old system over the coming months. And as I've said before, hopefully this year, finally in the autumn, we'll see something real change, not just another offensive that goes so far and then stops. We'd like to get it done this year. We're all going to try our hardest. But, you know, it's not over until it's over. And as we saw with the stealing of the UK election and the installation of a fake King Charles, these people still have a lot of cards to play, and we must not underestimate them. I remain optimistic, but I'm not going to be naive and won't call victory until it's really available for everyone to see on all their screens and in the real world. But I'm feeling pretty optimistic, nonetheless, more than usual. Okay, well, that's what I have to say for myself this week. Now I'd like to answer questions from readers and viewers.
Hi, Ben. We have our first question for today. We have read there are several Trumps, the real deal, his avatars, and KM clones. With all the evidence of a stolen Biden election, nothing was ever done to reinstate the original Patriot Trump. If there is an election, or even if no election and Trump takes over, how will we know that he's not another KM puppet?
You have to see what these people do, not what they say. Now, there is plenty of evidence that Donald Trump never lost control of the U.S. military based in Mount Cheyenne, Colorado, and in particular, the nuclear arsenal codes, the nuclear football. And you know, I've had friends who've gone to Washington, D.C. who claim that, you know, seen the Federal Reserve Board and the Treasury all boarded up. So what we're seeing, what we've been seeing since 2020 is a battle between the U.S. military white hats and what I call the Khazarian mafia, who control the mega corporations, especially that whole Silicon Valley complex. So the Trump, there was always a Trump in power, but he didn't have control over a lot of the internet, and that's changing with Elon Musk and X. That was a big move in that direction, and we're going to see now a move to end their control of advertising. Once they lose the control of advertising, that will remove their main tool for controlling the media. But I was told by, you know, U.S. Space Force senior staff that there are 3 Donald Trumps. You take it for what it is, but that's what I've been hearing. And certainly, we seem to have seen one Trump at Mar-a-Lago, while another one was facing court cases in New York, and then there was one in Mount Cheyenne. But these days, I believe that most leaders, including Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, Donald Trump, what they do is they are like spokespersons or spokesmen for a consensus among power centers, and that's what seems to be going on. I've never personally met Trump, so but I have talked to people who have met him, and the real one is tall, and he's always with Melania, and the actors are shorter and are never with Melania. That's as much as I know. I'd like to be able to, you know, meet him in person and check it out for myself one of these days. Next question.
Hi, Ben. It's always the same yearly thing. During the summer, we wait until autumn. During the autumn, we wait for the new year. And after New Year, we are told to wait again. You are asking us to believe in the white hats who basically let cold-blooded vaccine murderers inject their poison into 80% of humanity. So how are we supposed to believe they are the good guys? They knew what was up but allowed it to happen. So why should we trust them?
It is a war, and there are 2 sides, and clearly the vaccine thing was a major defeat for the white hats, and we now know that this was planned as far back as 1975, and they were able to launder about $10 trillion and to keep their show going with the vaccine. But the fact is that 80% of the world's population has not been vaccinated. And although a lot of people are dying from the vaccines, it's far less than what they planned, because they were hoping to kill 90% of humanity. Instead, they killed 17 million people. That's enough to get them all executed for war crimes, but it's not enough to keep them in power. Now, there are lawsuits all over the world uh, grinding their way towards these people, and they will be brought to justice. But I know I've been frustrated too. Every year we think that this time there'll be a new government on the 4th of July and that everything will be good. And it keeps going on and on and on. But that doesn't mean we should give up, because the alternative is to become literally slaves, like farm animals, with a digital number controlling what we can eat and where we can go and what we can do. And if we're not obedient, they'll cut off our supply or kill us with a vaccine. So we have to fight. This is a fight to the death. But if you look outside of the West, outside of the G7, if you look at the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or Africa, you'll see most of the world has already been liberated from these people. So it's not like there hasn't been any victories in the White House. It's just that the heart of darkness is in the Western governments of the G7, and that's why it seems so bad, especially if you're in the U.S. and you're watching all the illegals come in and you're watching the decline in security, and it's very frustrating. But as I mentioned in my talk, the White House has announced that Joe Biden is not in power, that the military is in power, and we hope this year finally it will really happen. But a lot has happened. People forget how much change has happened, how many of these big bad guys have been removed, and it is a long, hard war. Apparently, it's been going on not just for uh, years and decades, but actually thousands of years. So it's winding to an end, but it's frustratingly slow. But that doesn't mean I'm going to give up. I decided not to go to Canada this year so that I could fight through the summer to try to make it actually finally happen this year. I don't believe it until I see it, and you shouldn't either, but there's no alternative but to keep fighting until the White Hats win, and we are winning, and we will win, and hopefully sooner rather than later. Next question.
Hi, Ben. You consistently mention JFK Jr. now in your reports. Obviously, this is a huge story, which will no doubt shock some more of the sleeping into waking. Can you expound on the story? How do you know this? What have you heard about him and the whole backstory? And when is this to be publicly revealed?
I don't know the whole backstory, to be honest. As I mentioned before, his great grandmother was my great grandmother's sister, McCarthy. So we're distantly related. And if you look at what he says and does, he has been consistently using factual, real life information to show that the medical industry is a giant crime cartel and are mass murderers. And somebody has kept him alive. So he has some serious protection of some sort. But at the same time, you can see when he's been kept out of the presidential debates and other things that there are other people trying to marginalize him. I'd like to know more, but what I can tell you is that my latest information is that this time, when there is an official Trump presidency, he will be in charge of a committee investigating Big Pharma and bringing these people to justice, finally. I will try to get more information about him, but the fact that he's still around and the fact that his books are out there and that more and more people are supporting him is a sign that he is a major force for good, and we support his work. Next question.
Hi, Ben. Did upper echelon Democrats really think Biden was going to deliver a better performance at the debate? They only have until July 21st to replace him if they choose. Why does it seem like they are allowing him to look a fool?
I don't think they are in charge of the person acting as Biden. I saw this morning George Clooney editorial in the New York Times saying we got to get rid of Biden. It's a sign that they've realized that they've lost control of their puppet, their spokesperson, and they're freaking out. I've heard that Kamala Harris is now a man wearing a rubber mask, and that's why Kamala Harris's husband was supposedly diagnosed with COVID. In other words, they removed him from the picture so that they could replace the real Kamala Harris with a man wearing a rubber mask and hopefully use that. But I don't think it's going to work. I think their goose is cooked. Next question.
Hi, Ben. You say the UK election was stolen, but where's the evidence? In the case of the US election, there was a tremendous amount of evidence that came out on YouTube in the first few days. Election counts illegally stopped, election observers illegally removed from counting halls, bags full of ballots for Trump found in dumpsters, truck drivers testifying to driving stolen truckloads of forged ballots, etc. What evidence do you have that the UK election was stolen? This is the last question for today.
Well, I don't have evidence because I haven't been looking into it closely, except that I was personally told by the head of MI6 that the election was stolen. And if you look at the official numbers, you'll see that the UK has 650 parliamentary seats, and the Labour Party got 412 of those with only 33% of the vote. So that's one sign that there's something not right with the electoral system there. The other, of course, is that Nigel Farage's Reform Party got 14% of the vote, but only got 4 seats, whereas the Liberal Democrats got 12% of the vote and got 71 seats. That just doesn't make sense. There's something wrong with the UK electoral system. And the other thing that I've been able to confirm, not only with the Japanese emperor, but with MI6, is that Keir Starmer was then made prime minister by a fake King Charles. So they have a fake monarch, and that alone makes the whole thing illegitimate. But I'll try to find out more. Okay, well, that's what I have to say for myself this week, and I hope to see you next week.